Imagine a ghost story not of specters or apparitions, but of absence. A ship, sturdy and seaworthy, sails silently across the vast, indifferent ocean, its sails partially set, its breakfast half-eaten, its logbook open to an incomplete entry. Yet it is utterly devoid of human life. No struggle, no signs of violence, no trace of the 10 souls who called it home. This is the enduring, chilling riddle of the Mary Celeste asterisk, a maritime enigma that has haunted the collective imagination for over 150 years, whispering tales of the inexplicable, the vanished, and the profound vulnerability of humanity against the sea's silent judgment. Today, the Mary Celeste is more than just a historical footnote. She is a canvas for our deepest fears of the unknown, a symbol of the ultimate disappearance. Her story, passed down through generations, has inspired countless novels, films, and theories, each attempting to fill the terrifying void left by her missing crew. She is the archetypal ghost ship, not because she is haunted by the dead, but because she embodies the unsettling possibility of life simply ceasing to be, leaving behind only an empty stage and 1,000 unanswered questions. She is a modern legend, a cautionary tale of the ocean's unpredictable power, a testament to the fact that sometimes, even the most meticulous planning and seasoned experience can be undone by an unseen force. But to truly understand the Mary Celeste and the real reasons behind her abandonment, we must look beyond the legends and delve into the world of her captain, Benjamin Briggs. Briggs was not a man prone to flights of fancy or reckless decisions. Born into a devout seafaring family in Massachusetts in 1835, his upbringing was as solid and unyielding as the oak timbers of a clipper ship. His world was one of precise measurements, of knowing the stars, the currents, and the capabilities of his vessel. From a young age, the rhythm of the tides and the scent of salt were his lullaby. He learned the ropes, literally and figuratively, serving on his father's ships, absorbing every lesson the sea had to teach. His was a sheltered upbringing in the specific, rigorous sense of a 19th-century New England mariner. Sheltered not from hardship or the elements, but from uncertainty. Every problem had a solution, every danger a known countermeasure. His faith was unwavering, his moral compass true north. He married Sarah, a woman as steadfast as he, and together they built a life defined by duty, family, and the sea. For Benjamin, the sea was not just a profession. It was a sacred trust, a lifeblood that flowed through generations of Briggses. His vessel was an extension of himself, his home, and the sanctuary for his wife and 2-year-old daughter Sophia, who accompanied him on this fateful voyage. He was a master in every sense of the word over his ship, his crew, and his own disciplined mind. He was a man who trusted his instruments, his experience, and his God implicitly. The brigantine Mary Celeste herself was a ship with a complicated past, having been involved in several mishaps under her previous name, Amazon Asterisk. But under Briggs' command, she was reborn, rechristened, and carefully provisioned for a transatlantic voyage from New York to Genoa, Italy. Her cargo, 1,701 barrels of crude industrial alcohol, a common enough shipment, though inherently volatile. Benjamin Briggs had meticulously prepared, his chronometer and sextant checked, his crew carefully selected. He had left nothing to chance, or so he believed. Here we encounter the first whisper of an ancient myth, that of the ship itself as a living entity, a spirit of the sea. In many seafaring cultures, a vessel is more than just wood and canvas. It has a soul, a will, a destiny. Sometimes these ships are said to reject their crews, to shed their human burdens and sail on independently. The Mary Celeste, found adrift on December 4, 1872, off the Azores in a seaworthy condition with its sails partially set yet completely abandoned, seems to embody this myth. Her hull was sound, her stores intact, enough food and water for 6 months. There were no signs of a struggle or foul play, and the crew's personal belongings, including valuables, were left untouched. It was as if the ship had simply decided to continue its journey alone, casting off its human inhabitants like so much flotsam. The rational, symbolic explanation for this mythic resonance lies in the sheer, bewildering integrity of the vessel. The Mary Celeste wasn't wrecked, she was merely empty. This stark fact suggests that whatever transpired, it was not a violent boarding by pirates or a catastrophic structural failure. Instead, it points to a deliberate, if desperate, choice made by the crew. The ship in its perfect, ghost-like state becomes a symbol of the asterisk illusion of safety, a testament to how quickly a perceived threat can overshadow objective reality. The ship was fine, but the crew believed it wasn't. The myth of the sentient ship, then, is a poetic reflection of this profound disconnect, where the vessel's physical reality diverged irrevocably from the terror in its captain's mind. The specific event that spurred Benjamin Briggs' change, the shattering of his sheltered certainty, was likely not a single cataclysm, but a confluence of escalating anxieties and perceived threats. Consider the cargo, 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. 9 of these barrels were later found empty, suggesting leaks. In the enclosed holds of a ship, such leaks could lead to a buildup of highly volatile fumes. While a full-blown fire and brimstone explosion leaving scorch marks was unlikely, the potential for a pressure wave explosion was very real. This type of blast, caused by the ignition of highly pressurized vapors, could generate a terrifying concussion without leaving any physical evidence of fire. Imagine the hold of the ship, a dark, enclosed space, filling with an invisible, odorless menace. The air growing heavy, perhaps a strange sensation in the ears, a low rumble, or a sudden, unexplained jolt that could be misinterpreted as a structural compromise. This scenario feeds into another ancient myth: the sea as a deceptive temptress, luring sailors away from safety with false promises or terrifying illusions. The fear of an explosion, a silent, unseen killer lurking beneath the deck, would have been a potent siren song to abandon ship. The Mary Celeste herself in this context becomes the temptress, or rather the illusion of safety she represented, now transformed into a potential death trap. The missing lifeboat, along with the chronometer and sextant, Captain Briggs' most vital navigational tools, strongly suggests a planned, though hasty, evacuation. They weren't fleeing pirates, they were fleeing something unseen, something deeply terrifying within their own vessel. The rational, symbolic explanation here delves into the psychology of fear and perception under duress. The Mary Celeste was not physically luring them to their doom, but the perception of imminent danger, fueled by the volatile cargo, created an irresistible pull towards what was believed to be a safer alternative: the small, open lifeboat. This act of perceived escape, of abandoning the substantial safety of the ship for the precariousness of a small craft, speaks volumes about the level of terror gripping the captain and his crew. It was a choice born not of clear and present danger, but of the overwhelming anticipation of it. The sea, in its vastness, offered no clear answers, only an amplification of internal fears. Another plausible theory further complicates this internal struggle. What if it wasn't just the alcohol? What if a faulty pump, perhaps clogged by residue from a previous coal cargo, led Captain Briggs to believe his ship was taking on more water than it actually was? Coupled with an inaccurate chronometer, which could have led him to miscalculate their position, perhaps believing they were closer to a dangerous reef or shoal than they actually were. Imagine Briggs meticulously checking his instruments, finding discrepancies. The pump isn't working right, the chronometer is off, the sea is rough. He orders the pumps checked repeatedly, finds them sluggish. He takes soundings, finds more water in the bilge than expected. His calculations place them dangerously close to a lee shore or submerged rocks. In the dark and the storm, his trusted tools are betraying him. His sheltered world of certainty begins to crumble. This leads us to the myth of the trickster god, Loki or Coyote, sowing chaos and doubt. Here, the trickster is not a deity, but the confluence of faulty equipment and environmental conditions, playing a cruel trick on Captain Briggs' meticulous mind. The unreliable pump, the inaccurate chronometer, these are the agents of deceit, turning a master mariner's greatest strengths into his greatest weaknesses. They are the whispers of doubt that erode confidence, turning a man of unwavering resolve into a figure riddled with uncertainty. The rational, symbolic explanation for this trickster element is the fragility of human knowledge and technology, especially when confronted by the overwhelming power of nature. Briggs, a man who staked his life and the lives of his family on his instruments and his judgment, suddenly found both undermined. The faulty pump and chronometer represent the breaking points of his carefully constructed reality. They symbolize the moment where empirical evidence becomes unreliable, where the predictable suddenly becomes terrifyingly unpredictable. The sea, with its inherent chaos, merely amplified these cracks in his foundation of certainty. And so, we arrive at Captain Benjamin Briggs' personal breakthrough, his profound transformation. It was not a moment of enlightenment, but of desperate, agonizing calculus. He was a man steeped in duty, a captain whose very identity was tied to his ship. To abandon his vessel was not just a professional failure, it was a betrayal of everything he stood for. Yet, faced with the terrifying specter of an unseen explosion, a potential pressure wave that could obliterate his family in an instant, or the perceived imminent danger of a sinking ship or a collision with a reef, his priorities shifted. The sheltered certainty of his upbringing, the unyielding faith in his command, shattered. His breakthrough was the radical decision to prioritize immediate, perceived safety over his lifelong allegiance to his ship. It was the moment he looked at his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, perhaps feeling the tremor of an unseen force, perhaps seeing the rising water, and realized that his duty to them transcended his duty to the Mary Celeste. It was the agonizing choice to trust his gut, his primal fear, over the logical imperative to stay with his vessel. He chose the unknown perils of the open sea in a small lifeboat over the perceived, invisible threat lurking within the familiar confines of his own ship. This was not a capitulation. It was a desperate act of survival, a profound psychological transformation from a master of his domain to a refugee from his own vessel. His breakthrough was the moment he stepped into that lifeboat, taking his family, his chronometer, and his sextant, believing he was saving them, forever severing his connection to the ship he had so carefully commanded. The mystery of the empty vessel Mary Celeste became a canvas for terrifying, fantastical theories: pirates, sea monsters, alien abduction. However, the truth lay not in the supernatural, but in a common misunderstanding and the primal fear of the unseen. The ship carried 1,701 barrels of volatile industrial-grade alcohol. Under the stress of a rough Atlantic voyage, the porous wooden barrels began a slow, imperceptible seepage. This created an invisible, odorless, and increasingly potent cloud of alcohol vapor in the ship's hold, a silent industrial predator. Captain Briggs, subtly sensing the acrid tang or subtle heaviness, was facing an unseen threat akin to the noxious vapors of ancient myths. Like mariners navigating the breath of an angry god, the crew's predicament was caused by this volatile alchemy, forcing them to confront the terrifying power of an invisible, man-made chasm. The rational, symbolic explanation for Briggs' profound psychological transformation lies in the properties of those fumes. Alcohol vapor, when concentrated, is not only flammable but also heavier than air. It would have settled in the lower parts of the hold, gradually rising, permeating the ship's wooden structure, perhaps even seeping up through the floorboards into the crew quarters and the captain's cabin. Imagine the cumulative effect: a constant, low-level exposure to an invisible intoxicant, not enough to cause overt drunkenness, but certainly enough to induce headaches, nausea, disorientation, and a heightened sense of anxiety. The crew might have felt inexplicably unwell, their senses dulled, their judgment subtly impaired, all without understanding the cause. Then came the specific event that spurred Briggs' change, the catalyst that transformed a latent anxiety into a desperate, life-saving decision. It wasn't an explosion. If it had been, the ship would have been shattered. It was something far more subtle yet terrifyingly real. A sudden sharp sound, perhaps a series of sounds, a muffled roar, a violent tremor, a concussion deep within the hold. This would have been the moment a buildup of alcohol vapor, reaching a critical concentration, ignited. Not a catastrophic detonation, but a rapid, contained deflagration, a flash fire, a swift burn of the accumulated gas, followed by an immediate consumption of oxygen and a rapid drop in pressure. The crew, already on edge from the relentless voyage and the subtle effects of the fumes, would have been plunged into instant primal terror. The ship itself, groaning and creaking, would have seemed to scream. The air would have been sucked from their lungs for a split second, followed by the acrid smell of burnt wood and vapor. Briggs, ever vigilant, would have raced to the hold, perhaps sending a crewman down to investigate. What they would have seen, or more accurately not seen, would have been the ultimate horror. No roaring fire, no gaping hole, just a smoky, disturbed void. The residual heat, the faint smell of combustion, the sudden absence of the palpable, invisible threat that had been building. It would have seemed as if the ship had momentarily breathed fire, an internal dragon asserting its presence. Facing an invisible, volatile threat, a presumed internal explosion from alcohol fumes, Captain Briggs underwent a profound psychological transformation. This was the ultimate test of his command, forcing him to confront his own ship as an unpredictable enemy. Prioritizing the lives of his wife, daughter, and crew over the sacred bond to his vessel, he ordered a temporary evacuation. The presence of his chronometer and sextant in the lifeboat suggests he intended to tether the boat, allow the danger to dissipate, and reclaim his command. This was not an act of surrender, but a desperate, heroic calculation, stepping into the lifeboat as a protector from the dragon within. Tragically, this act of preservation, driven by the primal fear of the unseen, severed their connection to the purged ship forever, leaving the empty Mary Celeste to sail on as a ghost, while Briggs and his party were lost to the sea.